Tonight on Ukraine Today, presidential elections in Ukraine. Why does Trump insist on holding them, and why are his words totally detached from reality? Ukrainian sanctions. Drones hit a liquefied gas terminal in Russia's Krasnodar region and a power plant in Cheboksary. Russian-Indian drone production. What scale are we talking about, and how exactly is Moscow paying New Delhi for this cooperation? Big money. How the so-called spokesman of the so-called Russian president, Peskov, makes fortunes on the war, the lies, and his access to Putin. All that and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun, and this is Ukraine Today. Please hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's get to the news. Drones from the security service of Ukraine slammed into a liquefied gas terminal in the Russia's port of Temryuk in the Krasnodar region. Reports say a massive fire broke out. More than 20 out of 30 storage tanks were burning. In addition, drones destroyed railway tank, a fueling container, and a loading ramp. Ukrainian drones also reached Cheboksary. Judging by what we see, a power plant was hit. Explosions were heard in Lipetsk, Ryazan, the Rostov region, and temporarily occupied Crimea. Airports in 8 Russian cities activated the carpet plant, a temporary ban on takeoffs and landings. 2 Ukrainian soldiers, under heavy fire, captured 6 Russian occupiers. This happened in the Alexandrivka direction. This video shows Russian artillery striking their own position, though Ukrainians still carry out the evacuation operation. Ukrainian units made a maneuver in the Pokrovsk direction to prevent encirclement. This area is considered the hottest right now. More on the situation at the front in the story.
Here it is.
Drones in Russia's Engels. There's an airfield and an oil depot belonging to the occupiers there. Drones also reached Volgograd, which sparked a strong reaction among the local residents.
What are you doing?
Over 30.
The occupiers near the Belgorod border are having restless nights. While Ukrainians are attacking Russian military targets, the latter in turn continue to shell Ukrainian civilians. This video shows the aftermath of a nighttime attack on Chernihiv, Ukraine. Russian forces attacked Okturka in the Sumy region. Hits were recorded on the roof and wall of one of the apartments in a 9-story building. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, who has taken it upon himself to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine, claims that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is allegedly not ready to accept a peace plan, if it can even be called that.
According to US law, which was adopted back in 2017 during Trump's presidency and signed by Trump himself, the United States will not recognize any territories that Russia has annexed from Ukraine since 2014, since once again there is a corresponding law in place. So if you want to do what's written in this plan to recognize these territories as Russian, you first need to change your own domestic legislation. Your own law prohibits you from doing this. So here, not only is the proposal itself, its initiator is external, and without the expertise of the State Department and Congress, it's illegal. But even the suggestions within these points themselves also contradict US law.
There's a clear example of how Trump is able to negotiate. After the conflict was settled by the US president, clashes broke out on the border between Thailand and Cambodia. Numerous murders, rapes, and other crimes in the African country of Mali are being committed by militants of the African Corps, which is subordinate to the Russian Ministry of Defense and has replaced Wagner. Accordingly, knowing the treachery of the Russians, no one can guarantee that Ukraine won't face a repeat of the conflict.
No one can provide us with any other security guarantee more effective than strengthening Ukraine's defense forces. So the only thing we can do in terms of security guarantees is to strengthen our army, not reduce it. Then when it comes to peace, we see that there are calls to reduce the Ukrainian army.
The son and namesake of the American president, Donald Trump Jr., does not rule out that his father may distance himself from Russia's war against Ukraine if attempts to achieve peace prove unsuccessful.
Russia, it is widely understood, supports peace talks for only one primary and compelling reason: to persuade the United States government to completely stop providing further aid and assistance to Ukraine, or at the very least to significantly minimize its overall contribution. Because the war that Russia could have, as they say, as was expected, first and foremost in Russia, but also thought in the West, won in 4 days, capturing Kiev and all of Ukraine in 2 months, has now been going on for almost 4 years. And to say that Russia is achieving success would be far, far too optimistic for Russia.
The so-called conquerors are going into Ukraine barefoot and barehanded, and they're the ones saying this themselves.
3.5 years of war. Can we really not centrally supply our army with underwear and socks?
Apparently, the Russian command simply doesn't see the point in spending money on their soldiers, who are eliminated almost instantly. And to cover up the losses of the dead, they record them as deserters. Partisans are the ones reporting this. Despite the problems in Vovchansk, Siversk, Mirnorad and Pokrovsk caused by the intense pressure from Russian troops, Donbas is holding on, according to Ukrainian war correspondents. Kupiansk is being shelled, but it still stands. Here too, the Russian army is taking a beating from the Ukrainian armed forces.
In just the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 930 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's 1,182,610 invaders. Also, in the last day, Ukrainian defense forces destroyed 2 Russian armored vehicles, 27 artillery systems, and dozens of other enemy military assets. In the Chernihiv region, massive fires broke out after a Russian drone attack. A private household, a farm, and industrial sites were damaged. Luckily, no casualties were reported. Occupiers also attacked 3 districts in the Dnipropetrovsk region, using heavy artillery and drones. Infrastructure facilities were damaged, but thankfully, people were not hurt. Russia is trying hard to make this winter extremely difficult for Ukrainians. The goal is to spread despair. However, the defense forces with Allied support keep finding ways to counter these attacks. For example, Ukrainian F-16 jets have likely started shooting down Russian Shahed drones using relatively cheap and effective missiles. More details ahead.
Every day, Ukraine is under massive attack from Russian UAVs. Drones are launched both at critical infrastructure and at civilian targets. But Ukraine has found the best way yet to counter Russian attacks. F-16 fighter jets have started shooting down Shaheds using APKWS-2 laser-guided missiles.
They can practically, let's say, operate with remarkable efficiency in real time during these so-called coordinated swarm attacks. In other words, one aircraft illuminates the target and delivers the strike with laser guidance, and then a second aircraft can engage the target as well. This is particularly noteworthy given that the Russians have started using the swarm launch principle for drones, that is, launching several dozen at once and in multiple waves.
Previously, the effectiveness of these missiles against drones had already been proven in Ukraine, but only when launched from ground-based systems. Now, however, this technology is also working in the air.
Moreover, the Russians are noting their high effectiveness. This concerns not only the destruction of the Geran 2 and Geran 3 drones with jet engines, but primarily reconnaissance drones. This was the main threat to Ukraine's defense forces. Reconnaissance drones operated outside the range of air defense systems, flying at altitudes of 5,000 meters and above, and thus posed a serious problem for the Ukrainian side.
The main advantage of these missiles is their price. Previously, to shoot down a single drone, they used missiles costing $1 million, but now the effectiveness is the same, while the price is several times lower.
Let me remind you that a missile for a short to medium range surface-to-air missile system costs about $100,000. The cost is around $100,000. But missiles for the Patriot air defense systems are about $1.5 million. These advanced and highly effective missiles, specifically their remarkable capability and inherent design to be primarily and strategically utilized against unmanned strike drones and unmanned reconnaissance drones, this particular aspect represents their principal and most significant advantage, which collectively and effectively make it entirely possible to substantially reduce operational costs while simultaneously and diligently maintaining a robust and highly effective air defense system.
Previously, it was believed that Ukrainian F-16S would not receive such weapons anytime soon. But suddenly, one of the partners provided Ukraine with special equipment that allows the use of such missiles.
This is an American development, so it was either the American side or European partners, but with the permission of the American side. The very fact that these weapons have been delivered clearly disproves the claim that the American side has suspended its expanded military technical assistance to Ukraine. In other words, this is an element of military political pressure on the Russian side. And note that the transfer of precisely American strike systems coincides with the intensification of the negotiation process.
The main question is, will this change the situation in the skies? After all, drones remain one of Russia's main tools of pressure. They are launched in series, in waves, trying to overload air defenses.
Not a single air defense system provides a 100% guarantee. Yes, this will significantly strengthen the Ukrainian side's position in terms of defense, primarily of key energy and logistics facilities. But to say that this is an absolute panacea, no, that does not reflect reality. This is just one component of the air defense system.
The new equipment has significantly strengthened Ukraine's air force. Now it is possible to shoot down enemy drones more effectively without spending expensive missiles on it. And this is especially important now when Shaheds threaten the Ukrainian skies every day.
By the way, the Kremlin assembles its drones together with India. Moscow pays for this cooperation with technology transfers and battlefield experience. Why does New Delhi want this? Where could India use Russian combat knowledge? And why is the Kremlin trying to drag its partners into its war? The story explains.
Good afternoon.
The Russian Federation is becoming increasingly dependent on India. Modi and Putin have decided to go into business together. I know
That in India they say, together let's go, together we'll grow.
Russia is actively expanding cooperation and seeking to establish joint production of drones. This is stated in a new report by the American Institute for the Study of War.
The Kremlin is considering expanding joint weapons production in India to include drones, which Russia will very likely use on the battlefield. In Ukraine, possibly in exchange for Russian technological innovations and lessons learned in Ukraine.
This was also confirmed by Sergei Chemezov, head of the Russian state corporation Rostec.
We have made proposals, we have sent our suggestions. Pasu 57. Russia is also ready to offer localization of production. They said, we'll think about it.
Moscow is negotiating with Delhi about localizing the production of Russian drones, including strike Lancets on Indian territory. The day before, in an interview with India Today, Putin emphasized that Russia is closely cooperating with India. It not only supplies weapons to the east, but also transfers technologies for the shipbuilding, missile and aviation industries. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, such statements indicate the Kremlin's intention to deepen military technical cooperation with India, possibly even up to the joint production of strike drones. Thanks to its ally, the Kremlin is likely counting on using these drones in the war against Ukraine in exchange for transferring to India new technologies. The visit of the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center delegation to India made everything clear. This was announced as fulfilling tasks within the framework of the Russian-Indian strategic partnership.
We greatly appreciate India's position on many issues. India is the only country, by the way, with which we have never fought and with which we have no mutual claims. And we are grateful to the Indian side for always responding to our invitations, coming to our exercises, and inviting us as well.
At the same time, Russia is trying to attract as much Indian labor as possible into the country. Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov stated that Moscow is ready to accept an unlimited number of migrants from India. As it turned out, because Putin sent a significant portion of the population to war, now Russian industry is lacking 1.5 million people in trade, construction and the service sector.
The manufacturing industries are in catastrophic need of at least 800,000 more people in addition to the existing workforce. As for example, trade, that's another several 100,000 people needed in that sector, as well as in construction. I think we have a more or less clear understanding. There are definitely jobs available.
In addition, the Kremlin appointed official, the head of the occupation administration of the Kherson region, Saldo, stated that he too discussed opportunities for cooperation with Indian representatives.
Business people from India, Iran, Nicaragua and France have shown interest. This is a sign of trust in our land, in its future, and in the determination of the people to build a new, prosperous Kherson region.
Cooperation with Russia is already causing India significant economic losses. Due to purchases of Russian oil and weapons, the US in 2025 raised tariffs on most Indian goods to 50%, including additional duties related to energy trade. This has hit Indian manufacturers focused on the American market. And after the latest meeting between Modi and Putin, the Indian rupee fell to a record low.
They say that in the past a yogi could go a year without putting anything in his mouth, but now they're breaking records by eating everything.
India is wary of sanctions, so it intends to reduce imports of Russian oil to their lowest level in 3 years. The largest Indian energy company has already completely stopped purchases, switching to raw materials from Middle Eastern countries and the US.
This is an important event, because we have known each other for 25 years.
The media reported that during Putin's visit to Delhi, he planned to discuss the purchase of Russian fighter jets and air defense systems. India has also agreed to lease a Russian nuclear attack submarine for 10 years at a cost of $2 billion.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now is the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see the truth. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. President Zelensky arrived in Rome for an official visit. He has already met with Pope Leo XIV. They discussed the return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Zelensky is also set to meet Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. In the long run, Ukraine is the first line of defense for the European Union. This was stated by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She said Ukraine's sovereignty must be respected and Ukraine's security must be guaranteed. These priorities were central in her talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
According to US President Donald Trump, elections should take place in Ukraine. He claims Kyiv is using the war as an excuse not to hold a vote, though the Ukrainian people should have the chance. Trump added that maybe Zelensky would win, but elections must happen because there haven't been any for a long time. Interesting. How exactly such elections can be held in a free, fair, democratic and accessible way? How should voting work in temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories? How should soldiers on the front vote? How should they run for president if they want to? And what about daily Russian attacks? It seems Mr. Trump is a bit out of touch with reality. Yet his words add weight to reporting by Axios, which says Zelensky is facing increased pressure from the United States. Washington reportedly demands that he agree to major territorial and other concessions as part of a so-called peace plan. According to Axios, the US proposal worsened after Witkoff and Kushner held a 5-hour meeting with Putin last week. Finally, let's talk money. Big money. The war Russia unleashed against Ukraine has been economically devastating for ordinary Russians, but some people saw their wallets grow much heavier. The so-called spokesman of the so-called Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, is a perfect example. He has billions in accounts, luxury watches, elite real estate. How exactly do Peskov and his wife make money on war, lies, and the access to Putin?
Dedicated to fans of propaganda. Starting January 1st, 2026, Russians will face major financial problems. Putin has gotten so carried away with the war that he decided to pour even more money into it, but not his own money, state funds.
Vladimir Putin has signed a law raising VAT to 22%.
Electronics, appliances, food, utilities, and life in general will become even more expensive. According to Rosstat, about 11 million people in Russia live below the poverty line. 8% of people can't even meet their basic needs, let alone afford any luxuries. And these are only the figures that can be shown publicly. But at the same time, the number of people in Russia who are beyond wealthy is growing. And these are Kremlin insiders. One of them is Dmitry Peskov.
We chose him, our president, we indeed chose him truly. Let's not interfere in this particular matter at all. His affairs. Let's let the president choose those whom he deems necessary.
The Kremlin's mouthpiece and a man of no comment. During the war, Putin got richer than anyone else because propaganda in Russia is a lucrative business. So Peskov gave himself a raise, multi-billion ruble real estate, a system of constant bribes, state support, a collection of luxury watches worth a total of 25 million rubles, large savings in banks, and a carefree old age for his children. Journalists from the Mo Explainer project have assessed the scale of luxury in which the Kremlin's chief spokesperson now lives.
There's Peskov sitting over there, across from me, my press secretary. Sometimes he spouts such nonsense. I watch him on TV myself and think, what is he talking about? Who told him to say that?
For example, the nonsense Peskov spouts earned him an apartment in Sochi in the Ideal House residential complex. 112 square meters. By the way, it's not far from Putin's residence. The residential complex has a gated, guarded area, a heated swimming pool, a gym, and a hypermarket. Inside, there are panoramic elevators. Then there are only 2 or 3 apartments per floor. There's a national park nearby, but the main feature, of course, is the view of the Black Sea, just a mere 60 million rubles. There's also an apartment in the center of Moscow, 113 square meters. As soon as Putin launched the full-scale war in Ukraine, the propagandist bought himself another apartment in Moscow City exactly 2 months later. 90 square meters, about 70 million rubles. But if you thought that was the end of the real estate list, you'd be wrong. A house in Rubliovka, several apartments in his wife's name, apartments for the children. And all because Putin really needs his own personal propagandist in the form of the loyal Peskov.
In general, what they are doing now is especially disgusting, truly vile. And quite frankly, it appears it should be compensated even more generously. This is because in the current political climate, loyalty within the Kremlin is primarily acquired through 2 distinct and significant methods. Through fear and through money. The old carrot and stick method. That's why betraying Putin is dangerous for your life. You can lose your life pretty quickly or end up in prison. But on the other hand, loyal service is rewarded with money. This is exactly what binds the current inhabitants of the Kremlin together.
Peskov, due to his loyalty to Putin, has received and continues to receive all benefits. However, sanctions made adjustments. Before the war, Peskov loved Europe, despite people in Russia calling it decaying. But now Peskov is under sanctions. And instead of Italy and France, which he loved very much, he now prefers the Maldives, the Emirates, and Turkey. Well, he doesn't just work for himself. He keeps going. Government contracts for his beloved wife are also in the picture. October 3rd, 2025. On that day, school children all over the country were given cards called Pride of Russia during a lesson called A Conversation About Important Things. Inside was an assignment to match a person with their achievements. The first one there is Tatiana Navka, a figure skater who of course has all sorts of awards in ice dancing. But after marrying Peskov, she became better known as the wife of a multimillionaire.
We're just lucky that we're both busy people. I have my own beloved profession, which is my life. I have children, a family, a home. Dmitry Sergeyevich also loves his profession. He feels right at home in it, like a fish in water.
If we tried to count all her real estate, we wouldn't have enough time before the end of the broadcast. She prefers to travel between her apartments and houses in a Mercedes. with the license plate 001, and it's even from the special 77th series. That includes the Kremlin and the FSO. As journalists have discovered, as of early 2025, Navka has 2.4 billion rubles on deposit at VTB Bank alone. Just the annual interest from all her investments brings in about 340 million. Then that's not counting salaries, fees, and Kremlin grants. Yes, despite conflicts of interest, she receives money from the state. Almost 80 million rubles just in 2025 alone.
Why not? It's just, my God, what's the big deal? Today is just the beginning, you see?
Not only the wife, but Peskov's children are golden too. Peskov's eldest son, Nikolai, as Navalny's journalists found out, wasn't hiding his love for expensive parties even back in 2017. He also owns real estate, luxury cars, and has over 100 unpaid traffic fines. He loves speeding too. Interestingly, at that time, Nikolai was living in Britain under the surname Cholis and was convicted there for assault, spending over a year in an English prison. After the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine, Peskov's son returned to his homeland. Already in 2023, Nikolai Peskov got a job at the Roscongress Foundation. This foundation organizes the very same St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Just for working there, he earns between 100,000 and 200,000 rubles a month. Peskov's younger son, Mikhail, spent his entire childhood in France. In Russia, he enrolled at MGIMO. After the sanctions, he swapped Paris and other EU cities for Turkey and the Emirates. And 27-year-old Liza Peskova already has her own business. She also lived for many years between two countries, Russia and France. But after the sanctions, she also changed her travel routes. Despite the war, Liza continued to earn money in Russia. The real goldmine turned out to be her stake in the advertising agency Centru, which also thrives on government contracts. And all this wealth is only thanks to the fact that Dmitry Peskov continues to obey Putin and play along with Kremlin propaganda. Billions in income, carefree lives, and elite daily routines. Ordinary Russians will never get to see any of this because Putin continues to destroy the economy. Vladimir Vladimirovich, exercise your right.
Oh dear esteemed director, sir, I must address you. And
this Kremlin policy has literally trapped everyone who isn't among Putin's inner circle.
Everyone sees everything perfectly well. Everyone understands everything perfectly well. But it's also important to understand something else. Today, protesting in Russia is mortally dangerous. Today in Russia, the sentences being handed down are absolutely insane, which I don't even know, compared to those. The sentences being given out today are longer than they were in Stalin's times. They don't execute people yet, that's true, but Russia has a moratorium on the death penalty. But as for the sentences, they're already longer than they were in Stalin's times. That's why protesting is mortally dangerous for every person. And everyone understands this perfectly well. And there are a lot of people in Russia who disagree with what's happening. The other thing is, for now, it's unclear how exactly this protest against the eternal dictator can be effective. But as soon as such an opportunity arises, I assure you, everyone will be very surprised by the number of protesters we will see.
But for now, there is no such opportunity. All the people's money is going to the war, which has already destroyed most of Russia's population. According to opposition media, more than 150,000 people from the Russian Federation have already died in Ukraine. The highest number of casualties is from Bashkortostan. To be against means prison, to be for means to be left with nothing. A choice without a choice. And while in Russia, those living below the poverty line are being forced to give birth, Peskov's children continue to expand their wealth. So much for the great superpower.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.